So, when I was a kid, younger, super young, uh, this would have been around the time that I had the recurring dreams for a while. I'm not sure. I think that might have been before, but throughout the course of my childhood, my father is an alcoholic. He is an alcoholic. He's always been an alcoholic. Um, and he was kind of, he was a little on the rough side in a way that, he'd lean towards, punishing me and being punishing toward my mom for whatever reason. He'd make up in his head. He used to, accuse her of all kinds of things that was all bunk bullshit, but when he got drunk, then he would go overboard and he would, take to, if he was being punishing toward me or angry toward me, then he, would take to hitting me with things like weapons, and my grandmother tried to protect me. We lived in my grandmother's house, my mom and I. My father was with us a little ways through that, but at one point he was effectively discharged from the living scenario, but I mean, he was still around. He lived with my other grandmother just a little ways away, a few streets away, other side of town, but he would get fairly abusive in that way, physically harmful to me, and he would be very physically harmful to my mom, and like terribly obnoxious, uh, verbally, emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive. And when he was discharged from the living scenario, then he would get drunk and he'd take to calling, and he'd call, say obnoxious things, get rude and abrasive, yelling on the phone and whatnot. And my mom, and she would tell him to fuck off, and eventually, she would stop answering the telephone. And so then he'd keep calling for a little while, and the phone ring off the hook, and eventually he'd stop. The phone would stop ringing, and when the phone stopped ringing, we knew what was coming. He'd show up and he'd start screaming outside. He'd try to kick the door in. There were times when he did actually kick the door and get in, and then, likely happened from there, but he'd throw rocks through the windows, smash things. He'd throw bricks through the car windows and shit. It's just a tough sort of scenario to be in. And there was a point where finally got rid of him, in a manner of speaking. managed to keep him away, and that's a different story. That's a particular story in and of itself. But I don't know. I guess ultimately I'm relating how my childhood was in that regard, and these are things that I didn't really remember a whole lot. I mean, that impression stuck, but a lot of it I had forgotten. I didn't remember. The memory didn't stick because I was medicated. There are various reasons for that. I suppose I'll get around to telling that story eventually, but I was medicated for, attention deficit is what they're going to ultimately call it, but there were specific scenarios that brought that about. And they actually are of interest to our story here, so I'll have to bring those up, but there's a lot of things that I didn't really recall, and there were values that played on me from there. that I didn't know why, because I didn't have the memory in full effect, But, and that was that sort of thing would happen every night. It was every single night. That phone would start ringing after he had a couple beers, and he didn't have like the wet brain thing going on that he does, more recently. Then, but like, and he was younger. He was able to walk for the most part when he's been drinking, which the wet brain thing causes for him. A couple beers and he's done. He's toast. He's totally out of it, and he's back in that mode, in that abusive mode. But he can't walk really. Can't stand up. He has to crawl around because he can't manage when he's been drinking. And mind you, my father's a pretty great guy. He's not like an evil person. He's not a bad guy. He's a pretty awesome guy, and he's accomplished a lot in his life. And he has a particularly strong sense of loyalty. Maybe I get that from him, but he drinks and he just blames the world for his woes, and he's particularly attached to things, and that's something that I've got that I need to work on getting rid of, is that attachment, that I get attached to things, I get attached to people. Of course, I'm not gonna hurt anybody over it, but he did. My mom didn't want to talk to him because he was too drunk and he was being an asshole. She didn't want to talk to him, then that was just all hell broke loose. That was the end of the world for him, And he'd lose his shit, and he'd show up every night screaming outside, throwing rocks through the windows, trying to kick that door in. We'd have to call the police all the time. But as I was saying, that there are values that played on me and my behaviors and the way that I think and feel about things, especially the way that I react to things. There are certain triggering mechanisms effective in there, cues that would hit me and cause for certain reactions based on that I was unaware of. But after finding those memories and getting in touch with them, I was able to work with them and identify certain values and remove them. The values that make me scared, the values that make me feel victimized, those were eliminated. But some of them, were held, kept in the bank. Particularly the values that tell me that, that's not a part of myself I want to see or ever want to see or have happen. That's your part of myself that tells me to be vigilant and to be on point and alert and ready, cautious. The part of myself that tells me to stand up, the values that tell me to stand up and to be strong rather than cowering. Especially the values that tell me that that sort of behavior is not acceptable, and that if I see somebody, the value that tells me when I see anybody being abusive to a woman or to their lady friend, or even, abusive to their partner in any way, or abusive to anybody really, but especially a man being abusive to a woman, the values that tell me that something needs to be done about that it's either going to stop or somebody's going to get hurt, and it's not going to be me. Very rarely is it ever me that gets hurt when these things happen. I may appear to be small, skinny guy. I don't got a lot of muscle to me, but I know how to use it very well. And I don't care how big and strong you might think you are. If you don't know how to use it very well, tear you apart. And if I see you hurting a woman, being abusive in any way to a woman, especially your own partner, I'll put you in your place. Anyways, that's, a premier part of the development of my personality, something that needs to be expressed. I suppose that You guys know where I'm coming from as I tell this story here. Uh, that that was how I lived most of my childhood, cowering, hiding, afraid of him every day, every night. So either cowering and hiding from him or getting hurt by him. So that's it. It's not a happy story. It's not something I like to dwell on, but it needs to be said. It's part of the story. It's an important part of the story. And again, my father's not a terrible person. He's just a weak person. So that's it. Kila Salai, Devi Unisi Namaste.